Oh my god, we're back again. Yep, kids, the Demons from Outer Space, episode 101 episodes of the Demons from Outer Space. Joining me, of course, Dylan McCandless, Super DM64.
Hello, everybody. You might notice that it's been a while since we did an episode of the Demons from Outer Space. After our 100th, we kind of took a few weeks off.
Yeah, we, of course, did the Week of Kong in the past month or so, and while we were recording that, in the last sort of couple weeks we were getting the last couple episodes done, we decided to push off the Demons from Outer Space until after the Week of Kong was over to give the Week of Kong some time to breathe. So, Kong Skull Island is out, even though Dylan hasn't seen it yet. So we thought it was time to bring back the Demons from Outer Space, even though I can't mention any spoilers about Kong Skull Island. But hey, maybe some of you listening haven't seen it yet either. Maybe the rest of you live under rocks as well. So I guess that's good for those people. So this reaches a wider audience. So, D, to that effect, what are we going to talk about tonight then?
Well, tonight we have a review topic that we've been meaning to get to for quite some time. And you in the audience might be saying, ooh, are you doing another X-Men review? No. This has actually been coming for a little bit longer than that, I think.
Here's an X-Men review for you. Logan is fucking brilliant. Go see it. X-Men review over.
It is. You'll see it. You'll get more of a full review of that whenever the fuck we get around to that on this show, which will be a while. But
because it's gonna take me a while to stop crying while I'm watching it.
Yes, that is true. But no, actually, tonight we're going to be talking about one of my favorite tokusatsu things ever, the 1966 film Daimajin, which is, of course, the first in the Daimajin trilogy, all of which came out in 1966. Now, this is a movie that ever since I saw it for the first time, I have been eagerly recommending to anybody that I could that I thought might have an interest in it. I told Bill about it many, many times, and at that point his stance was that he didn't care about those samurai pictures, but he's had a turnaround on that.
I don't like the swords. I love guns, but I don't like swords.
He's had a around on that recently. He's seen quite a bit of the samurai pictures, including Daimajin. Actually, you bought the trilogy this past G-Fest, did you not?
Oh, did I? I don't remember. No, yes, I did.
Yeah, you were going to buy these shitty bootleg versions, and I was like, no, don't buy that shit. You want to get the fucking Blu-ray, because the Blu-ray is one of the best things that fucking, is it Mill Creek? One of the best things they ever fucking did.
Yeah, I think it's Mill Creek. Hang on, I'm trying to... Yeah, it's Mill Creek. I can see you from across the room here. The reason why I considered buying those shitty bootlegs is because I wasn't sure if they were going to have the official version. They did when we finally got to that table. But that was all the way across the ballroom, D. I didn't want to walk over there and check. I was like, I can just buy them right here. They'll probably be the same experience. But thank God I sprung for the Blu-rays, man, because holy shit. So you said that you recommended this to me, of course, many times. This is a movie that it's one of those kaiju movies I always heard about, but was never really interested in seeing. There were elements of it that just didn't really interest me. Nothing about the monster particularly excited me. But you hear people rave about it, particularly the special effects and the characterization of the monster and how good the human stuff is. I started to rethink it, and then, in the past few years, since I've been more active in the kaiju community on YouTube, I figured I should probably sit down and give it a watch. So, over the past year, I finally did that. Over the past summer, I finally bought Daimajin on Blu-ray. And sat down and watched all three of them, not back to back. I watched one on one day, and then I think I watched it again. So actually, I think I've seen this movie a total of 4 times, because I think I watched the first one twice initially. And then, I don't think we mentioned this when we were at G-Fest the year prior. We saw a bit of the shitty bootleg version, like the American version on the in-house G-Fest TV channel. And
yeah,
I was like,
this
looks
real.
I said what I say about a lot of American versions that are public domain crap TV stuff. I always say, wow, this looks really good if I was watching this looks really interesting if I wish I was watching the Japanese version,
Yeah, I remember I kept saying to you, I was like, Bill, God, I wish we were watching the Blu-ray right now, because as good as this looks, it looks a million times better on the Blu-ray.
This would look amazing if it was in Japanese, yeah. So I finally did that, and I guess we're gonna talk about it and talk about whether or not it is amazing. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. It's got a reputation that I don't think is a mystery. But D, this is your kaiju franchise. This is something that's a particular point of fascination for you that I just sort of admire it. I just sort of appreciate it, not on a strictly clinical level, but I'm certainly passionate about how fucking dope it is. But it's not something that just fucking makes me go, oh shit, I'm gonna tell you everything about this. But you go out of your way to look up stuff about this movie and buy stuff that has a connection to it. Like you bought that book. I remember if it was this past. I don't remember if it was this past G-Fest or the year before. That was entirely in Japanese. That was all about like the technical effects of this movie. What was the deal with that?
It's basically the making of. I mean, it's got everything in it. I can't actually read it because I don't speak Japanese, but there's all kinds of diagrams and shit in there, and you can look through it and infer quite a bit, even if you aren't able to read the book. It's a fascinating read. I wish I could recommend it to people, but I don't know even how many copies are out there. Like we really lucked up on finding it.
Yeah, it was pretty. It was not shady, but it was pretty. It was kind of like you stumble across an antique at like a fucking flea market or like a pawn shop or whatever. It was pretty. It was one of those things you see at one of these conventions that makes you go, whoa, that's probably either really expensive or if it isn't, it probably should be.
And yeah, it wasn't as, if I remember correctly, it wasn't as expensive as you might think.
Well, you bought it, so I presume it wasn't that expensive. But no, see, that's the thing. Even if it was, you're a Daimajin fan, D. You would have fucking sprung out for Daimajin. So, what I want to ask you, one, is what exactly is it about the character of Daimajin, not even particularly the first movie that we're going to review tonight, but just the character in general and the franchise in general that fascinates you so much and makes you so passionate about it?
Well, first of all, the first major thing that really helps is that the movie is excellent. We'll get to talking about that more in a minute.
I fucking told you to ignore that part of it. No, I'm kidding. Go ahead.
So that immediately obviously has something to do with the appeal, but beyond that, I don't know. It was just it's something that first of all I think it's something that I hadn't really seen before. The way that they combined the franchise or not franchises, the genres. It's a fucking swords movie, but it's also a kaiju movie. It's an interesting mix of two things that I enjoy. And also, the character is just so badass. Like, you could make an argument, I think, that I don't know if any other creature we've ever seen on the big screen could defeat Daimajin, because the way he's portrayed, he seems nigh invincible. And we've never seen him fight anything else except for that TV series that I still haven't watched. So, and that's
what's that called again?
It's called Daimajin Canon, and technically it's not the same.
Isn't that fascinating? Because it's totally... Because there is no real Daimajin canon, number one. And then two, if there was one, that show is not part of it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, the monster in that isn't even the same creature. It's not supposed to be the same creature. It's just a similar concept.
Well, that's one thing I wanted to bring up. He's not really a monster, is he? He is portrayed and brought to the screen as a monster, as a giant Japanese kaiju type of creature. It's Suitomation. It looks like a Gamera or a Godzilla movie, even though it's a smaller scale and it's obviously set in feudal Japan. But it's obviously akin to that kind of movie, and it portrays itself that way. But the character of Daimajin, at least to me, he's not a giant monster. He's a deity who enacts his will and his anger upon the people and upon the people who worship him as sort of a giant monster. But his abilities and his power level, whatever that means, it doesn't even matter, because like he doesn't. His abilities are not limited by the fact that he looks and acts like a giant monster. And he doesn't really even act like a giant monster, as we'll talk about, like especially in the performance of the suit actor, which is another thing that's very unique in this film.
Yeah, in all actuality, he's not really I mean, I call him a kaiju. I consider it a part of that genre just because of the way it's done. But he's not really a kaiju. In all actuality, he is a god, which is interesting in and of itself. I mean, we've had plenty of kaiju over the years who are shown to be worshipped as gods, but it's rare that we get one that's actually supposed to be a literal god. I think maybe the only other one I can think of that comes close to that is Mothra.
I was going to say Mothra. Gamera,
and even
depending on the movie.
And even with Mothra, it's kind of vague, Sometimes she's more or less mystical depending on which movie you're watching,
But then you have stuff like Gamera in the Heisei series, like depending on the movie, he kind of seems godlike. But even then, it's more of like a very spiritual sort of thing. It's not even it's not even like a deity. I think an interesting one that we've seen recently is Shin Godzilla.
Yeah,
because that is an interesting sort of take on doing a godlike kaiju, because it's hard to know whether or not it is really what you could call a god or if it is just some insanely evolved life form. But whatever. Daimajin is not that. It is a strictly traditional Japanese deity.
exactly.
A spirit, an ancient spirit of the mountain that defends the land and enacts his will upon the land. However, I think where Daimajin is a giant monster and where the argument comes in is that the idea is, as far as I can tell, that the big statue that we see when the mountain gets opened up and when we have all those impressive composite shots of it, that's like the sort of symbolic representation of the mountain god, the benevolent spirit that watches over the land or whatever. And it's defending the angry spirit of the Majin, the demon. And I guess the idea is that when necessary, the statue, relinquishes, its guard and then lets out the monster to do what it's got to do.
Right. Essentially, it's an avatar. And no, I don't mean Avatar in the James Cameron sense. I mean Avatar
or
in like
the Nickelodeon Last Airbender sense.
No, I mean Avatar in like the Hindu sense. It's a form that the god takes to walk upon the earth and enact its will, which I guess in a way is kind of similar to the James Cameron sense. I mean, obviously the title of that movie was based on something, but
well, I thought it was more that they're just big blue cats, but okay.
Yeah, but so yeah, I mean he's a literal god.
But you're absolutely right. The god takes on the form of the Majin that it was trapping to do a very specific thing, or not even a super specific thing, but just to do a thing. And in this case, take its vengeance upon the dude who fucked with him, and then and then do what it promised it would do in exchange for the girl's life, quote unquote. Even though it doesn't end up coming to that. Spoilers.
Well, what's interesting about Daimajin is he basically is what the Odo Islanders thought Godzilla was. He's an angry god being who will appear and just take his wrath out on the world. He's same thing with like the Skull Islanders and Kong. He literally is that thing that all the other kaiju have always been built up to us as like, oh, this is what they think he is. This time it's like, no, that's what he is. Like that's what he does. Like
interesting. Yeah, that's really cool. That's kind of what we have in this movie. And I think that's sort of why it's so unique and why it stands out as a pillar of what you can do with this genre. Now, all that being said, so Daimajin has that unique, interesting twist and that really fascinating twist. But what about the movie itself? So we're obviously reviewing the first one from 1966, even though they all came out that same year. But the film the first film in the trilogy. So, all this sounds good in theory, D. But what's the thing actually about?
Okay, well, the story of Daimajin is pretty simple actually. The setup for it is there's an evil warlord who betrays his. This is, of course, feudal Japan. This is the area where you have like lords presiding over certain like areas of the country. It's all like subdivided and shit. A lot like feudal Europe as well. So anyway, there's this lord of this area, and he's pretty benign. And this happens to be an area, not just the area, as we find out in the sequels. There are multiple areas, but this is one of the areas where there's a Daimajin statue, and people fear this Majin character. But anyway, there's the lord of the land. He's very benevolent and what have you. But then this bad guy, this evil dude, basically betrays him, takes over the whole kingdom. It's very Lion King. The villain is called Samanosuke.
Scar. No.
Samanosuke, which is a fantastic villain name. Samanosuke, fantastic Japanese samurai name. He takes over the kingdom, and then the previous lord's two children, the prince and princess, if you will, are sort of whisked away and hidden by the priestess of the Daimajin religion, I suppose you could say, along with this samurai guy named Kogenta, who helps them to escape. And so those two people sort of
It's a
watch
little
after the
Star
tour.
Warsy as well.
Yeah, it's got a little bit of it's good. It's kind of similar to Star Wars in that way. Yeah, that's actually true. I didn't think of that before. Kogenta is kind of like the Obi-Wan in that situation. But so yeah, they whisk the two children away, and then so they grow up hiding in the woods from the bad samurai. So all these years pass. Samanosuke's ruling like a tyrannical dictator. He's got people enslaved. They're building shit for him. I think, aren't they building like a huge fortress or something? Like
I was gonna ask you about that. I could not figure out what the fuck they were building, and I thought that maybe I missed something in the first 30 minutes that I just missed while I was watching it because it was so late at night or whatever. But
yeah,
I paid attention to the last like fucking 50 minutes or so, and they don't explain it in any line of dialogue. But I do remember them mentioning that they're trying to sort of consolidate this dude's power over a couple of different stretches of land, like a couple different villages or whatever, and they need this thing to do that, right? Is that the idea?
Yeah, that's a plot point in all of the Daimajin movies. There's always an evil lord who takes over an area, but he's never just satisfied with that. He's always trying to expand his power beyond that point.
Yeah, that's a lot more directly sort of the idea in the next one.
Yeah, I think they're building a fortress, but I get a little confused sometimes because the third movie also involves slave labor working on a building project, and I know that one of them is definitely a fortress. Point is, he's got all these people enslaved, and they're building something. The prince winds up coming back to try to take his kingdom back. He fails and is captured, and so is Kogenta, the other guy. The priestess winds up getting murdered by Samanosuke, so all this bad shit keeps going down. And then Samanosuke, to top it all off, sends some of his men to try and break down the Daimajin statue, which does not go well for them. Afterwards, the princess begs Daimajin to wake the fuck up and do something about all this. Daimajin awakens, and then we get one of the greatest destruction sequences I have ever seen, where he goes back to the village and just like decimates everything, and then brutally murders Samanosuke.
You thought the scene where Tommy Wiseau tore up his room in the room was fucking brutal. You should see this fucking movie.
Oh yeah, and then after that, even after he's killed Lord Samanosuke, he's not really done because Daimajin tends to go into like a bloodlust sometimes. So he just keeps on killing people, like innocents as well as Samanosuke's men, and they basically have to beg him to stop. And then when he almost steps on this fucking kid that was in the movie, he almost steps on the kid. The princess throws herself over the kid, and then that act of heroic sacrifice convinces him to leave them alone. So Daimajin's spirit vacates the statue, and then the statue itself crumbles, and they're all left to lament the events that have transpired. But the kingdom is back in their hands. So that's the basic summary. I left out some details, but that's pretty much it.
So I would say that Daimajin, it's well known for the whole feudal setting, obviously. But what I think it's also more specifically well known for is the traditional Japanese feudal stories, more specifically samurai stories that are told around the monster stuff. So I guess the question is, how unique is the samurai stuff, or just even the feudal politics stuff, and not even necessarily samurai, story and character stuff around the giant monster action and mythos horror elements and spiritual elements. You know, is it original? Is it engaging on its own, or is it just filler that's just kind of okay enough to get us to the monster action? So
Well, I think
that's the first question I think we need to settle here.
Well, I think it's a hard thing to try and separate the two, because I think the thing that makes this story unique is Daimajin. You know, he is that element. He is the thing that separates this from other samurai flicks, and the samurai stuff going on is what separates this from other tokusatsu things. You know, they kind of go hand in hand in that way to make the movie unique. The story itself about, you know, the evil warlord taking over and then the prince and princess trying to take it back is pretty simple. You know, it's pretty archetypal. It's the kind of story that we see retold over the ages time and time again. But again, the thing that makes it unique is Daimajin, and it's not as if Daimajin. I mean, you know, it's not as if he's only. Well, I mean, he is only physically present at the end of the movie, but it's not as if he's only sort of brought up
and
near the end
a
of the movie.
bit at the beginning, and it's only sort of subtly implied.
Yeah, exactly. He doesn't feel like thrown into a previous movie. Like it doesn't. Like that would be a terrible way to do it. The concept of Daimajin is weaved in throughout. He's talked about constantly. There's always this talk about the mountain god, the mountain god. So he's always in the plot, and I think that's why the samurai stuff is the actual story that gets Daimajin to wake up is kind of simple, because it's just sort of set up to introduce you into this concept and then bring him out. You know, it's kind of like, you know, you look at 1954's Gojira, and I mean, as a monster movie, the plot's pretty straightforward. You know, craziest it gets is like, you know, the oxygen destroyer stuff at the end. Like that's kind of the unique little flourish on it. But for the most part, it's, you know, your standard monster shows up. You know, you have the standard scenes of the scientists discussing what it is, the government discussing what to do. You know, it's all basic. It's all pretty simple. And I think the same tact is taken in this case, where it's a pretty basic samurai story, but with this amazing, fantastical element thrown into it. And I think the other thing that really helps it is that I think all of the performances in this are pretty good. I think everybody sells what they're about. You know what I mean? Nobody really stands out. Nobody really stands out to you like, oh, that was bad. Like, what were they thinking?
No, definitely not. Everybody's very believable. And I'm glad you brought up Gojira, because I think that it's totally analogous to that, in that, yes, there are some very, very standard storytelling elements going on around the unique high concept element of the story, but the performances, as you mentioned, but more than that, I think the cinematography makes it so engaging and keeps you engaged that all of the human stuff feels almost just as high concept and fantastic and engrossing as the monster stuff does. In this first one in particular, just like in the original Godzilla.
Mm.
Would you? Obviously, I think you would agree.
Yeah. So, do you think that the samurai elements of the movie are work enough? Basically, the question that you posed to me. I mean, you've seen a few samurai pictures now. Maybe not as many as I have, and certainly not as many as someone like our friends Sean and Patrick have. We're all still catching up to them. But you've seen a few samurai pictures now, so you have a little bit of a frame of reference.
I've seen like one. I mean, I've seen Seven Samurai now. I've seen a bit of Hidden Fortress, and then I've seen this and the other two Daimajin movies, and then that's pretty much it, I think.
Mm.
And then I did a research paper on the genre, and I learned a lot about it. So I know a lot of things about it, more than I have experience with the actual genre. I need to see more. I've sort of been slowly trying to dig into Kurosawa, so I'm going to continue to do that. But I totally think it works in this, and again, I think it's just because the performances and the cinematography and the entire production is there to support that kind of story. So it's not like you're going, oh, this is a cheap ass fucking knockoff samurai movie that happens to have a giant monster in it. Not at all. It's a well-made, engaging, and interesting, well-told samurai story that has this giant monster element. But I also think that what really makes it work is the fact that they weave the monster into the samurai story. It's not like they are two completely different, separate things where, like, it's an hour of samurai stuff that has nothing to do with the monster, and then the monster shows up randomly at the end. The monster is, the mountain god Daimajin is mentioned throughout, as you mentioned, and he directly impacts people's decisions and things that they do. Our characters who are escaping from Samanosuke they escape to the mountain god's lair, his domain. So he's obviously very directly connected to the story, and he also sort of picks the side of our lead characters very early on by sort of letting them live in his domain for all that time, and obviously that is carried throughout all the way to the end. And I think that it does a very good job of connecting all of the tissue together in a way that a lot of monster movies really struggle to do. And I just think that this one found all the right balancing elements. I don't know if it's just the genre and the type of creature just the type of character we're dealing with here, but this movie in particular really strikes a balance that it's rare. But you've seen more samurai stuff than I have, obviously. Did you see that before you saw these Daimajin movies? Did the Daimajin stuff get you interested in that, or?
I think I did see the Daimajin trilogy. I'm trying to remember back. I think I did see these movies before I watched, any Kurosawa. I wouldn't say that Daimajin made me interested in that. I'd always been interested in that. It was just something I hadn't really gotten around to. But I would say it definitely probably helped. I would think.
Does this particular movie remind you of any other samurai movie in particular, from either before or after?
No, it reminds me more of stuff like we mentioned Lion King and Star Wars.
Yeah, no, it definitely
it's got kind of a story.
That's sort of the thing that works about it, though, isn't it? It takes other very archetypal, basic narratives that we're all familiar with, and then puts it into this different context. So that totally works.
I guess the only movie I could kind of compare it to a little bit is Throne of Blood. Except that Throne of Blood is told from the perspective of the samurai who kills his lord and takes over the kingdom, because that's it's Japanese Macbeth.
Yeah.
So that's the only one that I can think of that I would say is probably sort of directly analogous to this.
So let's talk about that particular plot element then, because not that an evil samurai, not necessarily evil, but just a dark, ambitious warrior takes over a kingdom and becomes a lord. Is obviously what we're dealing with in this first movie, and an evil tyrannical lord is what we're dealing with in all three Daimajin movies. So I want to talk about how that plays this first time, because this is the definitive, element that will carry throughout all three. Is Samanosuke your favorite villain
of these three movies?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think his name has something to do with it. He has like an epic fucking
just
name.
Just his name, that's it. It is. See, no. I remember more of the characters' names in this movie than I do the other ones. I can't remember any of the names of the characters in the other two. But I've seen this one multiple times, whereas I've seen those two once each.
Exactly. I can't name the villains from the next two movies. Ultimately, they both just kind of feel derivative of Samanosuke in this movie. That's the biggest complaint that you can levy against Return of Daimajin and Wrath of Daimajin, is that they both feel a bit too derivative of this movie. They have other things about them that you can point to and be like, oh, that's awesome. Like, I think the second movie has the best action scene in it of the three. But again, it all feels kind of derivative. The thing that makes Samanosuke so great, because I really do love the character. I don't know. There's just, beyond the name, there's just something about him. He's got like kind of a presence on screen. He's got a little bit of a swagger to him. He's very cavalier about, go tear down the fucking statue. I'm not afraid of a fucking guy.
That is a really standout scene in particular, where he shoots the musket, and then that's the cut that brings us into that scene. The priestess is begging him to stop his bullshit, otherwise Daimajin's gonna come kill everyone. And he's just smug and just like, I don't believe in this crap. Leave me alone. I'm going to do whatever I want. And the whole time, you just see the musket, and there's just like smoke just smoking out of the musket, and it's the coolest thing ever. And again, that dude's performance is one of the ones that stands out, even amongst all the really solid natural performances in this. As one, it doesn't carry the film because he's not just carrying the whole movie on his back, but it's one of the reasons you keep watching. His direct underling, the fat dude with the beard, is also really, really great.
Yeah, and he is kind of you can see a little bit of a progression with him over the course of the movie. He at the beginning of the movie, he's sort of young and ambitious, and he's taking over the kingdom, and he's very brash and confident in himself. Then you go through the time skip, and you come back to him, and you can tell that he's been in power for a little while now. Maybe he's maybe not as fiery as he used to be. He's sort of settled into this role. He's got a killer stash at that point.
He's firing muskets at random fucking windows.
And then the final portion of his arc comes when, then we also see him commit possibly the gravest injustice against Daimajin in killing his priestess, which is a scene that it's a little problematic because her death goes on a little too long. But other than that, it's very sort of it's
well,
dramatic.
Obviously that's intentional.
Yeah,
I think it's problematic not because her death goes on too long, but because there is no evidence that she's been injured on her body, and it's hysterical. She gets cut, and you see where the sword should have sliced her. I mean, in reality, all that happened is that the camera operator fucked up. Obviously what happened.
I don't know what Japanese standards and practices were like at the time. It's kind of like how you watch an old Western and people are getting shot left and right, but there's no blood.
You could also argue that because obviously there's a change in lighting in that particular little sequence there. So obviously she's supposed to be sort of evoking the spirit of Daimajin herself. So she's got kind of a mystical air to her. So I guess you can argue she's not being visibly injured because she's evoking the power of Daimajin. Fine. But she's obviously supposed to be taking punishment, and she will die, but it's just impressive and obviously symbolic that it's taking so much for her to go down, and she just keeps getting back up. It's obviously supposed to indicate to Samanosuke that he's fucked up because Daimajin is real and is mad.
Yeah,
but
and then of course
I just think that it's the lack of it's the lack of brutality and reality in the scene that makes it problematic.
And then, of course, there's the final turn in his sort of arc throughout the movie when Daimajin shows up at the end, and that's when he realizes once and for all that he done fucked up. And just that scene of him running from Daimajin and trying to hide, it's fucking brutal. We watched this movie together the other night, and Bill was like, I know I'm not supposed to like this guy, but Jesus.
I felt bad for him in that moment. But I'm terrified of humanoid monsters. I've talked about this on podcasts before, and we talked about this in the Week of Kong. Mammalian humanoid monsters freak me out in a way that reptiles never will. Kong? I mean, obviously I've seen a new Kong movie in theaters. Yeah, that, in the right context, that scares the shit out of me. There's just a veracity and a scary level of emotion in the face that you just don't get with reptiles that makes mammals and humanoids and man-looking monsters really freaky. And Daimajin has it in a different way. It feels more grounded and more personal with Daimajin, and again, part of that is the scale, but it is also that he's a big samurai looking dude.
Yeah,
he feels like a pissed off warrior. But I want to go back to Samanosuke himself before we delve into some other area. His background is interesting. I wish we got more of it. We learned that he's a drifter who was taken in by the previous lord, the lord of the Hanabusa clan. Is that the name?
Yeah, I believe that's the name, yeah. And apparently...
and obviously, he fucking takes this guy's generosity and then uses it against him. And obviously, we're supposed to think, oh, he's a fucking dickhead. But it makes him kind of compelling because he uses this opportunity for power, because he's like, I have the opportunity. Just he's ambitious, and that makes him interesting. Maybe not likable, but again, it makes him interesting, and you want to watch him. And that's something that's important with these characters. If he was just another rich dickhead who came in and took over the guy's land, that wouldn't be nearly as interesting. It's the fact that you see this guy chilling with the old lord and his kids while they're just going through a normal day-to-day life. By the way, I like that the movie opens on a creepy, unsettling threat of Daimajin attacking, as opposed to, oh, this dark lord is going to take over. I really like that the movie opens on Daimajin himself, and then we're introduced to the human conflict gradually. It's really good. But it makes him 10 times more compelling and more realistic. Not even just realistic, but just more real feeling than he could have been. And then I think the other two villains feel in this trilogy.
Definitely.
But we'll see when we get back to those movies, obviously.
Right. So what were we? I'm sorry. Where were we? We were
talking about the villain plot and the sort of arch nemesis of this film, because it's the definitive element for the entire trilogy and why this stands out as superior to the rest of them. But the rest of the human cast, though, so again, we've made it clear that they're more memorable than the rest of the trilogy. But even just looking at this as an isolated piece, do they stand out as likable and memorable, or do they all just fill space?
Well, I would argue that I don't think any of them are quite as memorable as Samanosuke was, but I do think they all,
not even the
work.
priestess.
Well, she probably comes the closest.
I really like the priestess. That's a great actress as well. The death scene, again, I think it would be better if she had some blood and some slashes on her. I think her acting would be 10 times more amplified, but it comes off as too over the top even for this material, because throughout the rest of it, she is very grounded and very earnest.
Mm-hmm.
And I enjoy that for her type of character. But you got Kogenta, the bodyguard. What do you think of him?
He's fine. I mean, you kind of compared him to.
He's kind of a block of wood, ain't he?
Yeah.
I wish he did something fucked up. He doesn't do anything interesting, does he? The most interesting thing he does is when he tries to break back into the village, but I think that was really stupid on his part, because I think it would have made more sense to send the boy, what was his name, Tanafune? Tanafumi?
I don't remember their names.
I can't remember the kid's name. I can't remember the girl's name either. She was fucking great, though, and very, very beautiful. But aside from even her beauty, just her acting was very, it very much so stood out to me.
Yeah, she was really good.
But the kid, though, I thought that it would have made more sense to send the kid in to do recon on what was going on with the slavery and everything, because that's why they obviously get sort of involved, because they see that things are getting really, really bad, and they're like, well, we need to step in and take back over and make things right. But you see what I mean, though? Because the kid obviously looks less recognizable to the people who they're trying to avoid. Why not send him?
I don't know, though, because he kept going. There was a running thing throughout the movie where he kept going to the work site where they were building, because his dad was one of the slaves there. So they were
not the little kid, the young lord.
Oh, okay.
I'm talking about when Kogenta tries to disguise himself and get into the village to see what's going on. I think that it would have made, and he says to the young lord, like, don't fucking go, I will, because if you go and you're captured and killed, all hope is lost. Let me go, because if I'm captured and killed, who cares? But that I don't think that makes practical sense. It's very noble or whatever, but I don't think that makes practical sense, because you knew these dudes back in the day. You look pretty much the same, a little older. Even if you put a dumb hat and robe on, they recognize him instantly. It happens in the movie. Like, it's shown as very stupid. I think it would have made more sense to send the young lord in, because they would have gone, well, I guess it could have been, but he looks like a dirty peasant, so whatever, who cares?
Yeah, it's true.
But it's a good scene, though, and again, everything in this movie is so well shot and well composed and well blocked. It's compelling, and even though it's dumb, I enjoyed watching it.
Let's see, other memorable human characters. You mentioned the Samanosuke's sort of main henchman. What is it about that character that really sticks out to you?
He's a fucking asshole, but he revels in it. He's clearly a dude who goes, I never had any authority when I was younger. Now I have it, and I'm never, ever going to let anybody live it down. And that's always, you always need that kind of character in this kind of story to give an element of, it reminds the higher up villain of what they really are. Just a total dirty asshole. Like, just like somebody who goes out and revels in violence and dirty work, and power. Mm-hmm. Like, Samanosuke tries to put on an air of nobility, an air of, like, he's a nobleman, or at least he's trying to be. And
right.
What we're reminded of with his henchmen is that he's not. He's a bloodthirsty asshole, and that's all he can ever be. And I enjoy seeing the passion that his henchman puts out for that. But you know what else? He's not over the top. He's not like a comic book kind of like henchman type of villain. Like, he's not Otis from the Superman movie,
no,
or anything like that. He's a warlord's right-hand man, and it's very believable in that context. So that's why he really stands out to me. I think the last person we really need to mention is the kid, right? Take?
I was going to say, you were talking about how it is true, he kind of like is the one who exercises all of Samanosuke's will. It seems like after Samanosuke takes over, at least from what we see, he spends most of his time just like in that castle. In a way, that fat henchman is doing for him what the priestess is doing for Daimajin.
Interesting.
Sort of just going around enforcing the will of the one that they're serving.
Yes,
but
I would have to agree. Yeah, Take.
Kid. Yeah. Do you think he's necessary to the movie? Because I don't know if he is. I don't really know why he's in there.
Well, doesn't he tell them what's going on? Isn't he? Well, not tell them, but isn't he the one who sort of incites the break in the status quo in the present day?
Yeah, that's true. So I guess that is sort of his function, because we see a little bit of what's going on through his eyes. Like I mentioned before, he keeps going back to this construction site because his dad's one of the workers there. He's basically trying to get his dad to come home, even though obviously his dad can't, not even by choice. But he wants the dad to come home because I guess the mom is sick, is the idea. And then the mom winds up dying. He gets chased away from the site because the slave drivers have had enough of his shit. And I think, doesn't his dad die in that sequence?
No, I think his dad dies later. Because his dad helps Kogenta escape, and then his dad is hung up, and then he's killed.
That's right. Okay.
Or I think he might be dead already when the kid shows up, not the little kid, but the young lord shows up to save Kogenta. He climbs up because he thinks Kogenta's hanging, and then he finds, I think, just the dead body of Take's dad. And Take's dad gets a bunch of really great scenes. That actor's not in a whole lot of the movie, but he's in enough to make an impact. I think we actually kind of open on him in that awesome bit at the beginning where there's the fire and everything, and we get the opening credits with the great Akira Ifukube score. And then we open on.
I should have mentioned that before. The score in this movie is done by Akira Ifukube.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, a lot of themes in this movie you later hear reused in the Godzilla saga, or in the Godzilla movies. And that was that kind of took me for surprise the first time I watched Daimajin. I had no idea that he was the one who had done the score for this movie. And then when you start to watch it, it becomes very obvious.
It surprised me more when I saw another Dai movie from this period called The Whale God, and that also has an Akira Ifukube score.
Mm-hmm.
But this one, I mean, I knew about it when I saw this one, but it is still very surreal to hear all these Godzilla cues in, and also War of the Gargantua cues in another movie.
Yeah. There's one moment in this movie, I think near the end, where I swear that they're playing the music that plays in '91 right before Godzilla kills Shindo. Like,
Yeah, I think I remember what you're talking about. But I was gonna say, I just want to wrap up on something I was trying to say earlier. The whole idea of like the Take's mom being sick and him trying to go to his dad at the slave camp to get him to help him because he's like, mom's dying, I don't know what to do, and his dad's like, I'm kind of a slave, I don't really, I really wish I could come help my wife not die, but they're not really letting me. It really, those are the scenes.
I don't really have a say in the matter.
Yeah, his scenes are really the ones that emphasize how horrible Samanosuke's rule is, and that's really important, obviously, to making us hate Samanosuke, or at the very least, wanting us to see Samanosuke get punished. So obviously, we're very excited when Daimajin shows up to do that at the end.
Right.
So do you want to talk about that then? A little more in detail?
Well, before we get to the destruction sequence, don't you think it would be wise to discuss the first scene where Daimajin sort of starts to wake up, the scene where Samanosuke's men try to destroy the Daimajin statue, and how horribly that goes for them.
Oh yeah, I mean totally. We can start there. It's an awesome sequence.
So the first thing that strikes you when you're watching this scene is the scale of the whole situation. That's when you realize that Daimajin, is not as tall as a creature typically is in one of these tokusatsu films. He's 20-something feet, I guess.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Like you see the humans up against the statue, and the scale is not what one might expect, because before that in the movie you didn't really get a good sense of his scale because you were always shown the statue kind of from afar, and this was the first time in the movie that we kind of got up close on it. But so that's the first thing that this scene helps to establish is the scale. But then they start hitting him with hammers, and that's not working, and then they drill that giant nail into his head. And that's when the statue starts to bleed, which is pretty bone chilling. And then fucking the earthquakes happen, and like he kills those guys without even waking up all the way. Like he just causes an earthquake, and they all fall into the ground, and including your favorite henchman. It's a great scheme. It's a great scene. It really establishes just how fucking powerful this thing is before he even has waken up and revealed his true form.
And I like that that's not enough for him to wake up proper. Like he kills all the dudes who directly tried to fuck with him, and he's like, all right, they're all dead, that's enough, I'm going back to sleep. And it takes the girl offering her to sacrifice herself for him to get up and actually set things right. So I really liked that. I really thought it was scary, and it really said something about the kind of force that Daimajin is, and that he's not one that really likes to meddle and likes to get involved. He's more about just chilling from afar, but sometimes he just can't. And then this is an instance where he really was forced to step in, and when he does, it is rather glorious.
It's also our first sort of introduction to the Daimajin imagery, because obviously the entirety of the movie has a lot of samurai imagery, but whenever Daimajin wakes up and gets pissed, shit turns biblical very quickly, and this is our first little glimpse of that, really. But the ground is opening up, the skies are dark, and there's lightning and shit. Like
I think that the opening shots give us a sense that we're in for that at the very start.
True.
We get some very fantasy imagery at the very start, and we see Daimajin's eye. Obviously the director wanted us to know what we were going to see later from the very start. And again, the first 15 minutes are establishing the Daimajin mythos, which I think is good, and we just don't see it in play until later. So I think the movie is smart to almost sort of bookend the god religious elements, around the realistic samurai stuff.
That's the other thing I think that really appeals to me about the whole entire Daimajin thing is just the concept of a creature who's not just a big monster that's come to kill you, but like it's like divine wrath personified. It's kind of fascinating.
Well, the suit actor's performance is one of the things that makes Daimajin stand out so much, because you have the real eyes of the actor. You don't have like big monster googly eyes or dinosaurian eyes or anything like that. It's the guy's eyes as he just sort of emotionlessly stares at nothing and just walks forward. It's Godzilla-esque in a way, but every now and then he'll glance at something specific, and it just has this power of just pants-shitting fucking, tension behind it, and it's great. There's that one bit where, he walks by like a guard's tower, like a watchtower, and he's about to walk past it. He stops, and then he just looks at the people in it, and then he just crushes it. It's a great bit, and there's a lot of bits like that. There are a few that don't work when they cut from, and they don't all not work, where they cut from the suit to the big life-size Daimajin like statue they have. The one with the stoic face. There are some really ambitious, impressive shots with that thing, but it looks nothing like the suit. Don't you agree?
Yeah, I think I know the moments that you're talking about.
Where it's almost like the King Kong 76 big robot thing.
Yeah, well, less distracting than that, I would think. But
there's more shots with it, though, interestingly. I think it's not as distracting because the kind of character we're creating with it makes more sense to look like that.
Yeah. I don't think it's like a huge problem, but I do see what you're talking about.
But we see it do way cooler stuff than the robot in King Kong. Like, I mean, it throws people and it crushes sets and it walks by camera. They only really use it when they need to use it for a cool shot. Or not even for just a cool shot. I mean, that's kind of just an after effect. But it's a shot that says something about what's going on. It gives us a sense of scale and power of Daimajin, and it allows our human actors we've been following in rather realistic settings this whole time to be on frame and interact believably with this fantastic element. And that's cool. That's awesome. I just wish that it looked more consistent.
How do you feel about the big mechanical hand?
I mean, that's amazing. I mean, there's just that one shot where our three main characters, Kogenta and the two kids, are like cowering in the background, and you just see Samanosuke in Daimajin's hand as it just walks through the foreground across the camera. I mean, that's some cool shit. That is some really cool shit. It's some of the most ambitious and successful kaiju cinematography I have ever seen.
And whenever it comes into a building to grab somebody, and like you see the mechanics at work, like the fingers twitch and everything, it's very well done, I think.
Yeah, there's that really cool shot. We kind of talked about it earlier towards the end, where Samanosuke looks out the barred window and he sees the guy crushed up against the wall. Daimajin has him in his hand and he's dying, and then he just looks over and he sees Daimajin looking pissed, and then Daimajin looks at him. I mean, that's just another example of how awesome the cinematography in this movie is.
So we've kind of been dancing around and now talking about the final destruction sequence. What a fucking sequence. How do you think it stacks up in terms of tokusatsu destruction sequences? Personally, it's one of my favorite. I think you could put it right up there with, again, drawing 54 analogies. I think you can put it right up there with Godzilla attacking Tokyo. Just the brutality of it and just the total scorched earth domination that Daimajin rains down upon this samurai sort of fortress.
I think that, again, it's another thing that's very analogous to 54 because it is so satisfying because of how it plays with the rest of the human story, isn't it? It feels so unique and so refreshing and so powerful, not just because it's fucking amazingly rendered and amazingly realized. I mean, obviously that's a part of it, but also because there's this very effective build up to it that gives us that sense of scale and awe that the scene is supposed to evoke. And I don't think it does just watching it on its own. You know? I mean, maybe,
Yeah.
I mean, if you showed this in a fucking classroom to a bunch of film students or whatever, maybe they'd be like, oh yeah, that's very impressive. But I don't think they would have the emotional context for it to really go, holy shit! You know? Because when you watch this movie, you sit there for an hour and 23 minutes and you get up to that hour mark and Daimajin wakes up and arrives in the village and starts knocking buildings down and throwing people around. You go, holy shit, like this, the movie takes a turn. And it's like From Dusk Till Dawn. You can't just jump to the vampire shit in From Dusk Till Dawn. You gotta have that realistic, grounded build-up to really appreciate it.
Right. Or kind of how, to go to an older example, the way that, like, Psycho, like, just takes a total right turn halfway through the movie. And then you're like,
Psycho's another good example of what this is analogous to.
And then you're like, holy shit, we are now watching a very different movie.
And it's not, you don't get angry. You don't feel like you were like either, like the movie was either misadvertised or you were lied to or it's taken a turn for the worse. It's taken a very, I mean, we've obviously been building up to Daimajin doing something this entire movie. So now we're just seeing it and it's given us a different perspective on all these events, which is obviously the point, and it's awesome.
Exactly. And I mean, what also amazing sort of ambiance and atmosphere created in this sequence. The sky is blazing red. There's all this wind going on. Like, there's moments where Daimajin doesn't even touch buildings and they just fall over because there's like this fucking like vortex swirling around them of just like wind and you know, lightning and like all the elements. It really does feel like you're watching the Wrath of God. And then the effects in this are so fucking well done. The suit, you know, looks good. The model, the miniature work, especially in this movie, looks so fantastic because of the scale. Because Daimajin isn't that much taller than the buildings, they render the buildings in such wonderful detail. And I mean, they break convincingly. It looks like real shit. Because I mean, I guess when you build a miniature on that scale, you are using mostly real materials. So it all breaks convincingly. It all looks awesome. I love the sequence where they try to stop him by like chaining him. And he just like keeps walking and just like drags those chains and just like tears everything down as he's going by.
Oh, dude! Whenever you do anything with chains in a giant monster movie, not that there's a recent example of that's got me particularly excited about that, but it's just the coolest fucking thing ever, and it's so cool in this. He just knocks down like 4 houses in a row just by dragging those chains.
I told you the other night, it kind of reminds me of that sequence, that part in Logan where he gets the car stuck on the chain link fence, so he just backs up and uses the chain link fence to wreck shit.
It's a cool example of like, oh, they tried to fuck with me, now I'm gonna fucking turn it back on them.
And then of course, to top it all off, the way that he kills Samanosuke. First of all, brutal.
Well, I just one last specific thing I wanted to mention that's in relation to the whole, you know, they try something to stop him and he just shows them why it's stupid for them to do that. When they burn all the hay around him and they basically form a blockade of fire around him so he can't get to them. Mm-hmm. He just looks around and somebody says, "We've got him now." He lifts up his hand, he brings it down, and the fire just goes out magically. And then they all just run because they know they're fucked. Oh, it's great. And it's so well shot. Yeah. The performance is on point. All in all, it's just good shit.
Yeah, that was pretty fantastic. Yeah, I forgot about that moment. But yeah, that's pretty fucking great. So yeah, the way he kills Samanosuke, first of all, it's brutal. But also it's there's an element in all 3 of these Daimajin movies of poetic justice, where the way Daimajin kills the main villain is sort of symbolic of their crimes throughout the movie. So first of all, Samanosuke had his men to crucify Kogenta and the prince character. They were both like hung up on these crosses, and they were about to execute them. And then when Daimajin came in, he of course he laid the crosses down on the ground so that they could escape, and then he went on his destruction path. So he carries Samanosuke over to this huge piece of wreckage that's in the shape of a cross. And I'm imagining that he left it standing that way just for this purpose. And he pins him up against it, and he fucking reaches up and he takes the nail that they stuck in his head earlier in the movie, because he's been walking around with this nail sticking out of his head the entire time, and it's a huge nail. Pulls it out and just impales Samanosuke with it, just like it literally nails him to the cross. It's very Christian.
Which is interesting because this is a Japanese movie with a very never mind. I was going to say that Daimajin is a very non-Judeo-Christian type of god, but in a characterization sense, he's very Old Testament god.
Oh, he definitely is. There's definitely some biblical shit in these movies. I mean, especially
the actual specifics of the religion are obviously not Christianity.
Exactly. It's kind of a weird mix in that way. He feels sort of like a Western idea of what a deity is, but imposed on an Eastern backdrop, which is interesting. So anyway, yeah, he not only do you have the poetic justice of Samanosuke being put on a cross, which is what he had done to our two main human characters, but you also have the poetic justice of him being killed with the nail that he had intended to sort of destroy Daimajin's statue. So it's double punishment, double poetic justice, and it's fucking great and again brutal. Like when that happens, the first time I saw this movie, like when he fucking takes that nail and he just like sticks it in, like you feel that, you know what I mean? You're watching it like, ooh.
You don't see a lot of that kind of stuff in giant monster movies either. Like if you're doing a marathon of giant monster movies and you put this on, I mean, of all the unique trappings that this has, that specific scene is one of the things that you just don't see in a lot of these other movies.
No, it's super brutal. You know what? It kind of at a certain point, this movie becomes like a slasher movie. Like I've often called Daimajin like the Kaiju Michael Myers, because when you're watching him kill these people, it literally feels like you're watching a bunch of teenagers run it, like they're trapped in a house, and all of a sudden Michael Myers comes in and just kills them one by one. Like the way he gets like down and personal, like he's stabbing people. He's not just stepping on people or breathing fire or anything else that you traditionally see a monster doing. He is killing people specifically. He sees them and he's like, you're going down.
He almost reminds me more of the Mummy, if we're going to compare him to like a horror character, because he can kind of do anything. He just chooses to do this more grounded horror stuff, you know? Like obviously the Mummy is more about like drowning people in sand and killing them with weird bugs, as opposed to like, just drowning everybody in a sandstorm like he or she could. And obviously Daimajin is more about stabbing dudes as opposed to just like blowing everybody away in a hurricane.
And it's beautifully done because it's all through the eyes. The only thing that's
a really awesome moment too, because when he stabs him, it's a close up on Daimajin's face, and it's the only time the suit actor portrays any emotion in the eyes whatsoever, and it's this one moment of angry satisfaction when he stabs him, and it's beautiful.
I don't know who this suit actor was in this movie, but whoever they are, they have this fantastic scowl. Like because the only thing he has to portray what Daimajin is sort of thinking, what his intentions are the eyes, and you can see it. When he kills people, when he's going on his destructive frenzy, he's got this fiery look in his eyes, this wrath, this destructive determination, and then at the end, when he decides that his job is done and it's time to leave, his eyes kind of soften a little bit. You can see it. It's like he's like, oh, I guess I'm done here. It's wonderfully well done. It's not even like when you watch other tokusatsu stuff and like you have sort of creature facial features. It looks like some kind of an animal, and they can kind of tilt the head a certain way or do something to sort of portray some emotion. In this, his body is a statue, like it's all stone, like his expression doesn't change. Literally the only thing he has are the eyes, and he does it all with those eyes. It's fantastically well done.
And I really like the bit that we have after that as well, because it this movie always breaks your expectations, I think. Maybe not always, but you brought it up earlier. He doesn't just stop after that. The dastardly villain is dead. If he was truly a benevolent god, he would just return to the fucking mountain and he would be done. But no, he's not a traditional protector sort of spirit. He's more of a, again, he's more of a scorch the earth Old Testament god, as you said, but more of a just indifferent force of nature even. Like when the girl offers her life to him to save the lives of Kogenta and her brother, who are going to be executed on a particular morning. And they're going to be crucified, which is also poetic justice for, when he crucifies Samanosuke. And when he saves them, all he does is he just knocks the crucifix over so that way they won't die. There's no grace or gentleness whatsoever or any feeling to when he saves them. He's just like, bop, done, and then he moves on to the real brutality. And then he's not even going to stop, like, after he kills the villain. He's going to keep destroying the village and keep raining his wrath down on the villagers. He doesn't listen to the young lord. He doesn't listen to Kogenta. He doesn't listen to Take. He's going to kill Take. The only person that he shows any regard to is the girl. And he does he's about to step on her. She begs him to stop, and then she cries, and he decides to go away. And what I took away from that this time is what I took away from that this time is that she is the only character who never raises a hand against anybody the entire movie. She kind of does nothing, and it's a bit of a problem. Like, she really doesn't do anything over the course of the story except wake up Daimajin. But, which I guess is kind of the point. And I think it is the point because he's like, you're the only one who doesn't start shit. You're just cool. You just chill. So I liked that she was the only one who could communicate with him and satiate his wrath.
Yeah, it's interesting. She's the one who really saves the day in this movie. She's really the one who
inaction.
Yeah, she's the one who topples things, and that's sort of a nice subversion of expectations. Because normally in a movie like this, you take the giant monster out. If this was just a samurai story about an evil lord who took over and all that, the main character would be her brother. It would be about him coming back to take over.
He's not at all, though.
Yeah, it would be about him coming back to take over his kingdom, which he tries and fails miserably at.
Yeah, he and Kogenta are kind of fuck-ups, and they sort of deal with that. Do you think that this movie has a bit of a sort of drop in the, like a bit of a dead spot in the middle when they're captured and we're sort of waiting to get to Daimajin at that point? Like right before the priestess goes to Samanosuke and after the kid brother is captured?
Yeah. There is definitely a little bit of that second act blues going on. It's not a lot though. It's like for the most part, this movie is very well paced, and I think there's just this one little brief bit in the middle that you're talking about where
it's a bit of a slow burn, but overall it knows what it's got to show you and when.
Exactly.
And again, that plays into the whole well-made nature of this entire thing. Just good production values, good performances overall. It's just a solidly made movie overall.
You were talking about how the girl begs him to stop. More so than that, there's a line of dialogue where she's like, if you have to, kill me if that'll satiate your bloodlust, and then leave everybody else alone. Like,
yeah, she sort of directly puts it on him. Then, like, do what you want, but do it to me, so that way you don't do it to them. She is kind of the best character in the movie for that, or at least she's the one with the most. She has the most sense and the most sort of personal to do. She knows what she knows what needs to and what should be done. She's got her head screwed on straight.
She's the most righteous person in the entire movie, and I think Daimajin,
and also the most innocent.
And I think that's what Daimajin sort of values. He goes out to punish evil and corruption, and then he kind of gets a little carried away over that. But the basic motivation there is sort of classic kind of godlike anger towards evil, and so it's her innocence and her humbleness that cause him to calm back down and realize, okay, I guess my job's done here. Time to go back to the mountain.
Mm. Word. All right. So we're over an hour in. I've got one more thing I want to mention, and then you can bring up anything else you want to mention, and then we're gonna wrap this up. So what I wanted to bring up is that I really like the last bit, and I like how this wraps up overall. We don't linger on the repercussions of Daimajin killing Samanosuke at all, and that's good because we don't need to see that. Who fucking cares? We can build a picture of it in our heads. We're all just sort of left with the consequences of Daimajin's actions, and we can make of it what we will. It's great. But what I also like is that Daimajin doesn't, like, the status quo doesn't just return to normal. Like, Daimajin doesn't just go back up to the mountain. Daimajin's spirit leaves the statue, and the statue crumbles. And then what I presume happens is that he goes off to the lake that he's at in the next Daimajin movie. So it's almost like when one area fucks up bad enough, he reaps his he obviously reaps his vengeance upon it, and then he kind of moves on to the next area that needs him. Did you get that sense from that, or did you think something else was going on there?
When the statue crumbles?
When the blue light flies up into the sky, which is obviously how his spirit gets around, and then the statue crumbles. I think that's his spirit moving on to another resting place different from the mountain, where he'll do some maybe good later.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you watch all three of the movies, the idea seems to be that there are these Daimajin statues, like, sort of in different places around Japan. And the people that live in the areas where one is, they seem to worship him for different reasons, depending on what their culture is. Like the people in the second movie see him as a lake god because their lives are centered around this lake, whereas the people in the first movie, he's a mountain god because their lives are centered around this mountain. Whatever their lives are centered around, that seems to be what they consider him to be the god of. So the idea, what I take the idea to be is that he's just this deity who these statues of him are all over Japan. Maybe the people don't even remember how they got there, but they worship these things, and then every now and then when he needs to, he comes down and inhabits one to bring justice.
But he might be constantly aware of all of them at the same time. But then why does this one crumble?
Well, they all do.
So you don't think that's him bouncing from one to the other, as opposed to, like, just being aware of all of them at once?
I mean, it could be, but then you run into the problem of, oh, well, it's real convenient that he was in this one this time when they needed him to be,
But maybe that's part of his sort of faithful I think that's sort of part of his biblical faithful awareness. He's where he needs to be.
Possibly.
But it's all vague and left up to interpretation, and that's how you want it with this kind of material, right?
I would say so. I wouldn't want it to be too overly explained, especially with something like Daimajin that's supposed to be, sort of mysterious and mystical.
It allows you to read into its relation to the human drama stuff more, to the really emotional core of these people, losing their family in the midst of power and greed and this struggle for dominance and survival in this feudal world. And the struggle to find happiness and peace and good things in what is a very hard life, where people are constantly just trying to fuck each other over to just inflate their own sense of worth or power or whatever. So I think that this movie does a really good job with the human stuff, and it does an even better job relating it to the monster stuff. And the monster stuff is solid to begin with. So, D, overall, I fucking love this movie. What else do you want to rave about it?
We've really run the gamut so far in this review. We've talked about the acting, the story, the special effects. We've gushed about. We talked a bit about how good the score is. What I want to ask you, since maybe this is something that you might have a better grip on, being that you're the one between the two of us who's been to film school, how do you think the movie looks? Do you think it's a well-shot movie?
Well, I've been raving about the cinematography this entire time. I think that's why it's so engaging, or a part of it. I think that, again, if this was a crappily made and crappily shot fucking, samurai movie that didn't have those production values to support the story, we might still look at it as a unique part of the genre, but we wouldn't look at it as a staple of what kind of awesome storytelling you can do with this genre. And again, I think that the cinematography is crucial to that. It's a beautifully shot movie. As far as I remember, all three of them are. But, I mean, I've seen this one the most. It visually sticks out the most in my memory. I remember a lot of shots from it. We've described quite a few of them in detail. And it's not just the monster stuff. All of the cinematography is fantastic.
That's the part that I was definitely the most curious about hearing your opinion about, because obviously we were both talking about how fucking good the destruction scene was, but obviously most of this movie is focused on the human characters setting all that up.
No, I think I noticed the human cinematography more directly than I did the monster stuff, because that's the stuff that I sort of relate to more, having learned how to film that kind of stuff. When we first see the female character, man, that's a cool build-up of shots and composition and editing and the soundscape of her singing. It's really, really great. And all of the cinematography with scaling the people against the Daimajin statue when he's awake or when he's not is phenomenal. Overall, it's one of those movies that's very smart about, knowing what it should show you in the imagery to make the story and the emotional weight very clear, and that's good. We talked about how simple this story is, and it is rather simplistic, but it feels that way, and it works so well that way, partially because of how good the film is at visually telling all of that. So I think it is a wonderfully shot movie, and it holds up against the really great, looking monster movies like Gojira, and even like, say, a Gamera 3 as just a really beautiful looking movie.
Yeah, it's definitely up there. It's one of my favorite tokusatsu movies. The one last word on how just fucking beautiful this movie is. I don't know if we probably on recording, but I think one of the things that probably convinced Bill to finally buy this thing is that this past G-Fest we went to a panel, because this past G-Fest was taking place in 2016 and was thus celebrating all of the movies that were having their 50th anniversary. There was an extensive panel talking about the Daimajin trilogy, mostly about behind the scenes stuff, how it was made, and they showed a lot of still images. And everything they showed, every single still image from this movie, and even like just behind the scenes shots of them making the movie, everything they showed felt like it was like an individual piece of art. You know what I mean? Everything was just fantastic looking. And I think that's the mark of a really well-made movie of this quality, is that you can look at any sort of frame from the movie and just like study it for a minute and be like, wow, look at that.
All that stuff before I even saw the films in full got me passionate about the franchise and made me kind of a fan of that character before I even sat down and watched the movies.
Fantastic panel too. Whoever did that, great job. But I don't know. I think we've said our piece, Bill. I think we've
done enough gushing. This episode was kind of gross because all we did was gush. There's
not a whole lot to complain about, is there?
No, it's a really good movie. I wish it was worse. No, I don't. It's not. It's like reviewing Gojira, in that it's like you just say how well everything works for a while. And what's different about this, though, is that it's a different kind of monster movie, and it's something we've never talked about in any kind of detail on recording before. So,
well, I have, but you haven't.
No, that's true. So obviously it was really worth talking about it, and I had a good time talking about it. So, I mean, hell, I thought it was better than Ghostbusters 2. So, what else do we even need to say about it then?
Do you think it's better than Ghostbusters 1?
No. Definitely not. It's not. It doesn't have nearly as many lasers in it.
Okay, well if that's your metric.
No, it's because it doesn't have as much 80s pop music in it. In fact, it's lucky it's better than Ghostbusters 2 cinematography-wise, because otherwise I'm not so sure.
Well,
without that on our own and shit going on.
Well, if those are the metrics by which you measure this, then fair enough, I suppose.
Word. So D, if there's nothing else that we need to say about good old Daimajin, we don't exactly have a specific plan for the next episode of the Demons from Outer Space. Although there is something that we can do that we've sort of been working on that I guess we could do next week. Do you know what I'm talking about?
No.
No? Oh, I wish you were. What have we, we've been preparing to do it for the past few nights. We've been watching movies in preparation.
Oh, that.
Should we do that next week? Or should we do that as a separate thing from DFOS? Or, because otherwise next week we could do Reliquary, or I was thinking we do that the following week.
Right.
So we need something next week. So I was thinking we do that video idea that I had that we were gonna do anyway. So we can do that next week. What do you think?
Yeah, most of the things that we have planned for the near future are our review topics. So this would be something a little different.
That's what I'm thinking. It is tokusatsu related, like this is, and I would like us to do something un-tokusatsu related coming up soon. But I guess Reliquary will break us up for that. So we'll do Reliquary in 2 weeks. That's obviously the book sequel to Relic, the second book in the Pendergast series. So if you want to read that in preparation for our review, if you're unfamiliar with it, go ahead and do that. Obviously, you can go back and listen to the first book and the first review that we did for the book and movie that we did like a year ago now. But next week, I
of course do not remember what number that episode was, but I'm sure you can find it.
I have no fucking clue. It's not that long ago, though. You can go look it up.
Do you remember what you titled that episode?
Reviewing Relic.
Oh, good.
It's very, very clear. And you can, if you look in the thumbnails, it'll the book cover and the movie poster are on there, so it's pretty clear. But that'll be in 2 weeks. And next week, though, Dylan and I have been slowly working on another giant monster sort of retrospective type of podcast. It's sort of a sequel to a thing we've done on this show before, but we did it a long time ago, and this will probably be maybe a little more in-depth, and we're going to do it as a bit of a different structure. We are going to be doing...
Possibly a little more controversial than what we did last time with certain people, maybe?
Oh, yeah, I definitely. We are going to be doing... Now, the idea is to do Dylan and I's 5 worst Godzilla movies, our 5 least favorite Godzilla films, the 5 Godzilla movies that just make us go, oh, I don't want to watch that. And the idea is to take our 5 and then talk about all of them in one podcast. But what we've been doing is we've been watching them together and talking about them, so that way when we do the podcast, we'll have a very common familiarity with them, and we're going to do them in order of, like, we're going to talk about this one now, and now we're going to talk about this one, as opposed to doing our own individual lists and ranking them separately. We're just going to do a kind of giant grab bag of Godzilla movies that Dylan and I don't like and talk about why.
Yeah. All in all, there'll be 7 movies talked about, because there's one that Bill has on his list that is not on mine, and there's... which means obviously there's going to be one on my list that's not on his. But for the most part, we have the same list. So it's going to be about 7 movies, I think, when we get around to lining them all out.
Mm-hmm. It should be a fucking blast. I mean, we haven't done a Godzilla specific. I guess we did the Megalon podcast, but that's not Godzilla specific. That was more calling than anything. But it's been a hot minute since we've done a strictly Godzilla podcast, so it should be fun to get back on and talk about our roots a little bit. So should be good fun. Obviously, I've done this type of thing before. I've done a separate video a long time ago, which was my top 5 least favorite Godzilla movies, and then I did a list with Adam a long time ago. That was my top 5 least favorites. So this will be my first time again in a while, though. So it should be good fun, and it'll probably be very different. There's one in particular. I guess I can talk about this next. I'll say it now. I might forget. Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster is one that was on my original list, like the one when I did it years ago by myself. I put it on there, and I finally got the Blu-ray of the Japanese version of Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster, and that is a fun-ass fucking movie. I mean, that is a good movie, in my opinion. I really, really enjoyed that the last time I watched it. And obviously we did that one together, too. Looks gorgeous. A total blast. Fun characters. Visually very engaging. Tonally, the polar opposite of, like, Daimajin and 54.
Oh, yeah.
But still totally valuable for what it's trying to be. A total escapist romp, and Jun Fukuda really clearly set his own direction for his Godzilla films with that first movie, and perfected it in Son of Godzilla. Sea Monster is sort of a fun but schlockier prototype for Son of Godzilla. But yeah, we'll talk about more of that next week. But don't expect to see Godzilla's Godzilla versus the Sea Monster or Son of Godzilla on that list, because you won't be getting it from me, certainly. So look out for some other entries. So that'll be it for this week then. So we'll see you next week for episode 102, Dylan and I's 5 least favorite Godzilla movies, or Godzilla movies that make us go ugh. So we hope to have you with us then as well. So until next time, I'm Bill Worster, aka Zazubaar.
And I'm Super DM64.
And you see nothing, because it's a podcast, Colonel Hogan. Good night, kids.